Good afternoon and welcome to Border Report live on this Tuesday afternoon, coming to you live from Harlingen, Texas in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. I'm your host. My name is Rudy Mideles, and joining me today, we have our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez.
Hey, Hi, Sandra. Rudy. How are you?
Good to have you. We're going to check back in with you in just a little bit because I know you brought a very, very special guest.
Very special.
Yeah, we're being joined today by Aaron Reichlin-Melnick of the American Immigration Council. So we're going to speak with him in just a moment. But first, we wanted to get through one headline to tell you about today, and that's a new tent camp being built here in the state of Texas. It's the largest tent immigration facility in the United States. It's going to be built in El Paso. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg, the U.S. government has awarded a contract to build the camp at Fort Bliss. That's the Army base out in West Texas. Now, that camp will become a deportation hub with up to 5,000 beds. That's according to a U.S. Department of Defense contract, and that would make it the largest immigration detention facility in this country. And that contract we just told you about is worth nearly $1.3 billion. That's billion with a B dollars. And it was awarded to a Virginia-based acquisition logistics company. Now, NPR is reporting that Homeland Security is preparing military bases in both New Jersey and Indiana. I believe that's Camp Atterbury that the Indiana National Guard uses. That they're going to prepare there. We're still trying to figure out which base in Jersey will be getting that. But those camps are being built to detain immigrants, as well as increasing the number of immigrant details at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And there's really no better segue into our guest today. Sandra, I'll go ahead and let you introduce him to folks.
Aaron Reichlin-Melnick, everyone knows him. He's an immigration guru, very, very knowledgeable, former immigration lawyer, currently senior fellow at the American Immigration Council in Washington, D.C. We've spoken a number of times over the years, and thank you so much for joining us, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
So, we just talked a little bit about some of the efforts to beef up some of these detention facilities. Wanted just to jump in and get your thoughts. Obviously, what's been going on in the country, ICE raiding many facilities, the protests in Los Angeles. As a former immigration lawyer, as one very involved at the American Immigration Council, is this, how do you feel about these raids and, the potential adding of 10,000 ICE agents under this new budget that was recently passed? I mean, is this process now fair, and how do you feel about what is going on right now?
What we've seen over the last month and a half, really since late May, has been a major shift in how ICE operates. In the decades before that, the agency primarily operated on a targeted basis, having lists of names of people that they would go out and arrest. But in May, Stephen Miller, a senior advisor at the White House, called together all the heads of ICE field offices to a meeting in Washington, D.C., and ordered them to ramp up their numbers, to abandon a focus on so-called quality in favor of quantity. And ever since then, we've seen large-scale raids, unlike what we've seen in the United States in decades. Really, you have to go back to the 70s or 80s to see immigration operations that look like this. And that has been very unpopular to the American public. Ever since the Los Angeles operation began, Trump's approval ratings on immigration have plummeted. And we have seen the agency shift from a focus on people with criminal records to a focus on arresting just as many people as they can, regardless of their background, which means more and more people with no criminal history, gardeners, landscapers, people working in restaurants, have all been picked up at rates we've never seen before. And this is causing a lot of chaos. It's causing a lot of fear, and it's disrupting immigrant communities around the country, but in particular, the places where DHS is focusing its most attention, like Los Angeles.
Yesterday, Todd Lyons, the ICE acting director, actually told News Nation's Cuomo that 70% of those people who are arrested have pending criminal charges. You're saying that they don't. You're saying that this process is not fair. What do you say to what Mr. Lyons said yesterday?
Yeah, so it's important to break down what that 70% figure is. And that is, of the people that are currently in ICE detention, about 70% of them have some form of previous criminal arrest and criminal charges, or have previously been convicted of a crime, which is about a third of the people have some form of conviction, a third of them have some form of pending criminal charges, and a third have no criminal history whatsoever. Of course, of those who do have criminal records, most of those are low-level misdemeanors, immigration offenses, traffic offenses, nothing serious. But that is itself the lowest that figure has been in years. Going back, the data on this goes back to 2019, and before then, it had never been below 85%. In fact, when Trump took office, the number of people in ICE detention picked up by ICE in the interior who didn't have a criminal record, it was just 6% of those. And now it's 32% of those held in detention. And when you actually look at arrest data, when in Los Angeles, a majority of the people arrested in Los Angeles have never been convicted of a crime. So we are seeing a significant drop in the rate at which ICE is arresting people and detaining them who have serious criminal records, and an increase in the rate of that ICE is arresting who have no criminal record. As of today, there are more people in ICE detention who are arrested by ICE who have no criminal record than were arrested by ICE and have a pending criminal charge.
And what about reports that there will be no bond hearings for those who are caught entering the country illegally? I mean, is that due process? Is that fairness, in your opinion?
It's not. And it's also wrong on the law. So what is happening here is that ICE is saying that a 1996 law actually changed the state of bonds so that anyone who ever entered the country across the border, no matter how long ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, those people are categorically ineligible to go to a judge and say, Judge, I'm not a flight risk. I'm not a danger to the community. I should be released on a bond. And that overturns nearly 30 years of legal interpretation, which the government itself acknowledges is how they themselves previously interpreted the law. They just say, we're a new administration, we have a new legal interpretation. So now millions of people who are here undocumented, who used to be eligible for bond, we're saying that they're not. And that is going to be challenged in court. But in the interim, it's going to mean a lot of people who a month ago could get bond no longer will be able to.
And that's going to fill up the detention facilities. I mean, the number right now is about 58,000 people being held. We only have beds for 41,000. So that means that the remainder right now are currently being held in other law enforcement facilities, correct? And how does that, does that suit the needs of these people who are coming across? And is that where they should be held right now?
Yeah, right now, most people who are held in ICE detention are people who are arrested in the interior, not recent border crossers. With the border being quieter than it's been in half a century, that means that all the attention right now is being focused on the interior, and that is who is being sent to detention centers. And we are seeing appalling overcrowding in a number of different ICE detention centers because this administration is not only ramping up enforcement, but also limiting release, including release on bond. So there are exposés coming out about, for example, Miami's Chrome Detention Center, where at one point they had 1,800 people in a facility designed for 600. We're also seeing people being held in federal buildings in essentially holding cells that were supposed to be used for 2 to 3 hours, maybe 6 hours at most, to hold people before they're being transported somewhere else. Those too are so overcrowded that people are sleeping overnight on the floor in federal office buildings. So all of this means a lot more people being held in crowded, poor, substandard conditions. And that is causing a lot of them to simply give up rather than fight their cases.
Do you think that the $45 billion for detentions and the $30 billion to boost deportations is going to change the immigration game here in the future? Because this is the money that was just appropriated in the reconciliation bill. I mean, what is the $45 billion? Is that in the short term going to make a difference, or are these people still going to be held in these facilities that you're saying are not up to par, or are more people going to opt to just self-deport?
It is going to make a difference because $45 billion is an enormous sum of money. And when you combine that with the additional $30 billion that Congress gave ICE for detention and removal, you are looking at ICE's annual budget being higher than the budgets of the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshal Service, and the Federal Bureau of Prisons combined, with an annual budget of nearly $28 billion, which is a staggering sum. But most of those funds cannot be used on permanent infrastructure. They're going to be going towards building new tent camps, like the one that's just been announced is going to be opening in El Paso, because there is just a limited amount of bed space that can be acquired in pre-existing jails and prisons. They're going to have to build new facilities, and that's what most of that money is going for.
Wow. I think we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we want to talk about deportation to third world countries like the CCOT facility in El Salvador. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Aaron Reichlin-Melnick.
And welcome back to this Tuesday edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, your host. Sandra Sanchez on my right there, our South Texas correspondent. Our very special guest today, Aaron Reichlin-Melnick of the American Immigration Council.
Before the break, I called it third world country deportation. I meant to say third country deportation, so not third world. Deportations to countries other than their homeland. For instance, sending the prisoners to CCOT in El Salvador. Aaron, you wrote in your July 21st blog, quote, "It's one of the worst abuses of government power in generations, imprisoning roughly 250 Venezuelan men, dozens of Salvadorians without due process," end quote, after the federal courts blocked the deportation. The Trump administration says that these are the worst of the worst. They have been now sent to Venezuela in a prisoner exchange. Is this any better?
Well, certainly being in Venezuela is likely better than being detained in the Terrorism Confinement Center, or CCOT, in El Salvador. Those 250 Venezuelans had never been convicted of gang-related offenses in the United States. They didn't even have a warning before they were sent to the facility. In fact, ICE officials told many of the men that they were going to be deported to Venezuela. And they certainly were not the worst of the worst. The vast majority of those individuals had no criminal record whatsoever. Many of them had even entered the country legally, so had not even committed any immigration violations, and yet were falsely labeled gang members, often on the basis of flimsy evidence like tattoos, and imprisoned for 4 months, being held incommunicado. So they are free now, and they are back in Venezuela. That said, many of them had fled Venezuela seeking asylum in the United States. And given the autocratic regime in Venezuela, many of them may still seek to leave. But due to their newfound public profile, that may prove difficult. It's a complicated scenario.
Let's unwrap a little bit about it. You mentioned some of the reasons that they were sent, some of the process. Actually, tattoos played into some of this. I did speak to a lawyer of one of the gentlemen who said that, they had a tattoo, and DHS said that it affiliated them with Tren de Aragua. But she said, he in no way was affiliated with that gang. I mean, what was the process for identifying these people and saying that they were the worst of the worst?
Yeah, what we know of the process is that it was extremely sloppy. In particular, DHS had what they called an Alien Enemies Act validation guide. And it said if you have 8 points on this guide, then you have been validated as a member of the gang. It was 4 points if you had a tattoo that officials thought linked you to the gang, and 4 points if you were ever seen associating with someone else that DHS thought was linked to the gang. So simply being in the same room as somebody that DHS thought was a gang member and having a tattoo that they thought was a gang tattoo was enough for them to, quote unquote, validate you as a member of the gang. But we also know that this process was riddled with errors. One person was sent there who seemingly only was accused of being a gang because DHS messed up his paperwork and accidentally combined his file with someone else's. Another person was sent there who had a rainbow autism awareness tattoo. And when he was questioned about it, he was told by an ICE officer that his tattoo had nothing to do with the gang and that he clearly had no connection to the gang, and yet somehow found himself arrested anyway. And then in many cases, it was just due to the tattoo. Andre Hernandez Romero, a gay makeup artist who was sent there, had 2 tattoos on his wrists. On his left wrist, He had a tattoo of the word dad with a little crown above it. And on his right wrist, a tattoo with the word mom and a little crown above that as well. And DHS said those tattoos were proof that he was in Tren de Aragua, and they had no other evidence at all. But making matters worse, experts on Tren de Aragua say the gang does not even use identifying tattoos. It's not that no gang members have tattoos, but if they do, it's just because they happen to like that tattoo. And of course, there are likely thousands or tens of thousands of Americans who have some form of crown tattooed on their body. LeBron James, for example, has a crown tattoo, but nobody would accuse him of being in Tren de Aragua because of it. But that is effectively what happened to many of these men.
What about the expansion of Guantanamo Bay from 200 beds to 400 beds? Concerns there about sending people to this facility with its long storied history?
Yeah, Guantanamo Bay has been used for migrant detention for decades, but in the past, it's always been for migrants that were detained in the sea and sent there before they ever made it onto U.S. soil. So now we are having the United States arresting people inside the interior and detaining them in the same facilities, camps X-ray, that were being used for the 9/11 masterminds and terrorists. And many of these people have criminal records. Some of them do not. Initially, when they sent dozens of men to Guantanamo Bay for the first time, many of those individuals had no criminal records whatsoever. But now they're largely using the facility as a holding area to detain people prior to deportation to somewhere else. And these stories of conditions coming out of there are appalling. It is not a facility designed for long-term custody of individuals in immigration detention. And people report abusive conditions, lack of air conditioning, lack of medical care, and inability to call their lawyers or families. In fact, the ACLU had to sue over the ability just to make a phone call to people who are detained there.
You know, in the detention facilities that we have here in the United States, one criticism is when CBP detains a person and they are in that holding period, that there is no access to a lawyer, legal counsel, a phone call to anyone until they get to an ICE or detention facility when they are in the processing mode. So you're saying Guantanamo operates almost like that processing mode where there is no communication in or out?
That's how it initially operated. Thanks to lawsuits, the government has set up some process to connect people with lawyers. But from the reports that have been filed in court, that process is inadequate and significantly harder to use than what people get in a normal ICE detention center.
Switching gears, the Trump administration also says that it intends to go after employers who knowingly hire those who came illegally, who do not have proper documentations. I mean, how do you feel this plays into the immigration landscape now?
Well, it's most important to note that the Trump administration has already conducted dozens of worksite raids, more than any administration in the past 20 to 30 years. And yet, to my knowledge, only one employer has actually been charged with anything. So to some extent, I'll believe it when I see it. But certainly, I don't think you will find many people objecting to charging employers for violating immigration laws. It's just that oftentimes what we see with worksite raids are the book is thrown at the people who are arrested, the employees who are supposedly having their rights violated, while the employers largely skate by. And some of that is just to do with the fact that it's hard to bring a criminal case against people, especially those who are, hiring people who are using fake papers or somebody else's identification. But on the other hand, most of the time, the purpose of worksite raids is not to go after the employers, it's to arrest the employees and deport them.
Before we go to break, I want to ask you one question, because you are a former immigration lawyer, and a lot of people are saying that before you make this decision, you should consult with a lawyer. Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, launched a big campaign to push people to self-deport, saying that, you won't be fined. You will have the opportunity to return in the future. A lot of people I've talked to say, talk to an immigration lawyer before you make that decision. Do you agree with that, and why? What could happen to you if you do self-deport?
I completely agree. Before taking any kind of offer like that, you must talk to a lawyer. And that's because when you leave the United States, regardless of whether it's through the CBP home process or through some other process, people who are undocumented are then barred from re-entering the country for 10 years, then thanks to a set of laws known as the 3 and 10-year bars. So at minimum, people who take this offer will be unable to come back legally for a decade. But depending on some people's individual circumstances, they may never be able to come back. There is no line that they can simply get into. And even if they have U.S. family in the United States, U.S. family members, that in and of itself is not enough to guarantee them the ability to return. And if they don't have U.S. citizen family members, then their ability to return is even more limited.
We're talking with Aaron Reichlin-Melnick, Senior Fellow at the American Immigration Council, on a whole host of different topics this afternoon, and we'll be right back with more in just about a minute. Stay with us. Border Report will be right back. And welcome back to the program. That's Aaron Reichlin-Melnick joining us here today from the American Immigration Council. Sandra?
Yeah, before we left for the break, there's just so many subjects I want to hit with you, and we only have a few minutes left. But let's dive into South Texas here, where recently it was announced that the Department of Defense has declared a national defense area along a 200-mile stretch of the border in Cameron and Hidalgo counties. Basically, land is considered part of Joint Base San Antonio. Some people are calling this militarization of the border. Strikers have been sent to the Laredo area. What is your take on this? And legally, from a standpoint, how do you feel about this land transferring from the IBWC to the Department of Defense? And what access do residents like Rudy and I have to walk around the area now?
Yeah, I think the point you make about access to local residents is such an important one, because by turning these facilities into technically military bases, and when I say facilities, I mean large stretches of land right alongside the border, it actually does make it harder for U.S. citizens to enjoy the border regions to the extent that they have had the ability to in the past, because now they might worry about trespassing on military property. It has always been the case that a migrant crossing the border could be arrested and criminally prosecuted. But now what's happening is people are being charged not just with illegal entry, but also with trespassing on military property, because they've effectively turned large swaths of the federal border into a quote unquote military base. And so I think that is a real concern, not just for the communities, but also for the idea that the military is not involved in law enforcement at all. The military's always supported Border Patrol logistically in the last 20 years. Every single president has used the military for logistic support, but we've never seen anything like this before.
Here at the border, there is apparently no legal pathway right now to cross. There is remain in Mexico, or the migrant protection protocols was implemented by President Trump on his first day. There was a split decision by the Ninth Circuit just recently in California, but they say that a nationwide block of the Remain in Mexico program can only apply to the clients of the nonprofit that brought that challenge. So they're basically saying that the Remain in Mexico policy still is in effect. So is there a pathway to citizenship for somebody to cross at the border if they have no papers right now? Can they come across and claim asylum?
No. And the Remain in Mexico program, despite what the Trump administration has said, it's not actually in effect right now. And what is really in effect right now is a declaration that President Trump made on January 20th, where he claimed that he had the authority inherent to being president to shut the border and turn away all people seeking asylum. And this authority has actually been blocked in court. That court decision is on appeal and is not currently in effect. But as it stands, any person who wants to seek asylum right now at the southern border has no possible way to do so. They cannot cross the border and turn themselves into a Border Patrol agent, and they cannot go to a port of entry and try to start some kind of process there.
All right. Well, that is all of our time for today, Aaron. We wanted to just thank you for spending about 30 minutes with us, probably a little bit longer in the discussion ahead of time. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Aaron. We could have talked for a lot longer. We'll have you again soon. Thank you.
All right. And thank you, Sandra, for joining us. And thank you at home. Don't forget Border Report live every day at 2:30. Check your local listings, and you can get more on Sandra's reporting, Julian, Sal over in San Diego. You can get all that, plus these episodes every single day on borderreport.com. Until tomorrow, have a good day.